I've seen enough people go from stage 4 cancer, that's the end stage, to stage 0. As an expert in this field, I'm able to take a breath and a little bit of a sigh of relief to say, I think we know where we're going with this. So you want to hear where we're going?
I do want to hear where we're going.
Even more powerful is this idea that...
Whoa. Dr. William Li is a world-renowned physician and scientist who's dedicated the past 20 years researching the science of food and how food can play a role in prevention, treatment, and reversal of diseases like diabetes, obesity, heart disease, and cancer.
And one of the first discoveries that was ever made about the ability of the foods that we eat to starve cancer. And he was studying tissue samples from people that were from Japan. And what they found is when this researcher was looking at the urine, he discovered, boom, he saw a big spike. That spike doesn't normally occur in humans. It comes from plants, a substance called genistein that is found in soy. And I know there's a whole mythology, urban legend in this country, in America, about soy and breast cancer. But here's where I'm going to flip the script on this and show you why this is wrong. That whole script of soy and breast cancer is completely wrong.
Wow. What are the other foods that are standouts to you?
But let's go ahead and just create a list.
The Icon is a show where we learn life lessons from those who may shape the icon in each of us. And today I'm so excited to be learning more about longevity.
This is not food versus medicine. This is food and medicine.
Our health.
Hey, it's never too late to use food to reverse whatever's been going on in your life back towards health. That's the key thing.
And what it takes to be at our best with Dr. William Li.
I was trained in the same institutions the same program that pretty much every other medical doctor has been trained in. The big opportunity for me came from realizing that medicine, prescription medicines, really are only part of the opportunity to improve lives. But actually, there's a much bigger opportunity using food as medicine. And that's really what's captured my interest. And at this time in society, I think we're all sick and tired of the same old when it comes to healthcare. And I think that everyone is really woken up to this idea that we have all the agency to make good choices, to be able to use foods to make us healthier. I can take it one step further. I like cooking. I'm a foodie. I think that foods have to be delicious if you're going to get people to kind of embark on a lifelong journey using food for health. And so for me, it's good health, good taste, and making it practical and accessible.
I think a lot of people's ears just perked up as you said that. And what was interesting that I was doing some research into your work is that, two words really stood out to me. Food was one. Cancer was another. And some of the connection that you're seeing between your research and cancer. What should we know about that word right now that we probably don't know?
Oh, okay. So I'm also a cancer researcher, and that makes me comfortable, and also a doctor who has taken care of cancer patients. So I'm saying that because I'm very comfortable talking about this subject in a really cutting edge but balanced sort of way, and I understand what's important to what people want to hear about, which is not the hoo-ha, like the magic solution that everyone wants to know about curing cancer, but really what is the state of the art and what's promising, what's giving us hope. Okay, so I've been doing cancer research for probably 30 years, okay? And I have to say in my 30 years, I've seen the disease of cancer, which is one of the most feared conditions that we all dread and hope we never have to encounter. But unfortunately, most of us know somebody who's had cancer, maybe passed away from cancer. And so it's really kind of like a specter over our shoulders that we kind of don't want to think about, but we can't avoid fearing, right? So it's like the worst of the worst. And I say this because I've been touched by cancer as well. My mom had cancer. My uncles had cancer. I lost 2 uncles because of cancer. So I know the same thing that everyone else has. But what I do know is also what research is delivering to patients. So I want to first say, as a cancer researcher, that in the lab, when you hear other people talking about cancer research in the lab, it's not that difficult to cure cancer in a lab. happens every day. Very difficult, however, to translate whatever happens in the lab, in test tubes and mice, to humans. In fact, usually doesn't work in people, which is why we feel so despondent when we think about like, what can we do to help people with cancer? However, I will tell you that I have been working at the forefront of translating exciting science that we didn't know before into real treatments for cancer patients that are leading us, at least leading me, to see the end of the tunnel. So I never thought I would say this in my career, but I have actually seen the end of cancer. How do you defeat it? I've seen enough people go from stage 4 cancer, that's the end stage, to stage 0. That is reversing end stage disease. I've seen it happen enough now using real science and real treatments, combining food and medicine, and involving the latest breakthroughs in cancer treatment, that I actually feel that finally, for me, as an expert in this field, I'm able to take a breath and a little bit of a sigh of relief to say, okay, I think we know where we're going with this. So you want to hear where we're going?
I do want to hear where we're going.
Okay. I can see you like leaning on the edge of your seat. Okay. First of all, we now know that we all form cancers in our body all the time. This is not a rare occurrence that comes up if you're unlucky or just smoking or drinking too much or have a gene. In fact, by the way, all the emphasis on cancer genetic screening, which is very useful, only helps catch about 5% of cancers around the world. That means that 95% of cancers are due to diet and lifestyle, other things that are not our genetics. So please, if your doctor is able to screen you for, high-risk cancer genes like BRCA, that kind of thing, go for it, because that's information that you can use to your advantage. Anybody can do it, but you got to have your doctor go to bat for you. So I would encourage that. But even more powerful is this idea that our bodies know how to fight and defeat cancer all by itself. We're hardwired to actually be healthy. We are hardwired to fight cancer. And this is why, even though we form cancers all the time, I'm going to explain this big statement. Even though we form cancers in our bodies all the time, most of us don't get sick with cancer when we are kids, when we're teenagers, when we're in our 20s. And that is the unlock. That big unlock is not asking, oh man, why me? Why did I get cancer? What I did as a cancer researcher is say, hey, you know what? There's an even bigger question. Why don't we get cancer more often? And the answer lies in our body. So first, let me frame this out for you. Our body, human body, healthy body, is made of 40 trillion cells. That's more cells than you can see in the nighttime sky. All right. And I will tell you that those cells are designed to be able to duplicate themselves, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. That's why we're still here today. You and I, Tyler, are still here today compared to yesterday. And that's why we're still going to be here tomorrow, because our cells are copying and pasting each other. So there's more of us to go as we are aging and doing our thing. Okay. Now, copy pasting is a big deal. It's not that easy to do. And in fact, if I gave you a sentence, I read a sentence, Tyler, and asked you on a keyboard, just a word processor, like a laptop, to copy that sentence, I don't like green eggs and ham. And I asked you to copy it 10 times, you're going to do it perfectly. All right. If I asked you to copy it 100 times, you're probably going to make a mistake, maybe one mistake. Good thing there's spell check. If I ask you to do what the body does and copy that sentence 40 trillion times, guarantee you're going to be making a mistake somewhere along the lines. All right. And that's what the body has to deal with. And every time our body copy and pastes and makes a mistake, that mistake is a mutation in our cells, and mutations are what causes cancer. So any mistake that our body makes every single day, copy and pasting 40 trillion times, will lead to some mistakes. All right. Fortunately, our body also has spell check, and those mistakes are microscopic cancers, and we live with them all the time. And the reason that they never become a problem for us, for the most part, at least in the first part of our lives, is because our body has the spell check. Our body has defense systems that cut off the blood supply to the cancer so it can never be fed. Doesn't get oxygen, doesn't get nutrients. And our immune system, all right, everybody knows about the immune system after what we've been through in the last 5 years. I can tell you our immune system protects us. It's like the Mike Tyson of health, protects us against bacteria and viruses from the world around us. Go ahead and take a flight someplace to go on vacation. How many germs do you think you're encountering in that little cylinder we call an airplane? Or take a subway or take a bus or take a train. We're encountering germs all the time. Our immune system protects us from those invaders outside of our body so they don't cause us to get sick. But we now know, and this is the key thing I want to communicate to whoever's watching or listening, our immune system protects us from invaders inside our body as well. That's a surprise. And those invaders are abnormal cells, cancer cells that are forming every single day. So every day we form a few of these microscopic cancers. They never have a chance to grow up because they can't get fed, no blood supply. And then our immune system acts like cops on a beat, driving around the neighborhood, making sure everything is peaceful in the neighborhood. And then when they see a microscopic cancer, that's like, living in the suburbs and a squad cars driving by, not expecting anything bad to happen. Oops, they see a drug dealer or somebody who looks like a drug dealer on the corner. They got a big backpack, who knows? Maybe it's crystal meth in there. And so what they do is they stop, they pick up the person, throw them in the back of the squad car and take them away. So now the neighborhood is safe again. And that's exactly what our immune system does. It patrols our body looking for trouble. And when that trouble is a microscopic cancer, our immune system just wipes it out like a dry eraser. Okay. Now, what we're doing in cancer research is figuring out how to amplify, how to boost that defense system. Not one Mike Tyson against cancer, but 10,000 Mike Tysons. Okay. That's a pretty packed ring of pretty powerful people. All right. I would say Mike Tyson's not on a rigged script, like full blown. All right. And using immunotherapy, and that's basically treatments that are geared to amplify, unleash our immune system. We're actually able to take stage 4 cancer and dry erase it out and make it stage 0. And that's what I'm seeing. Not in every patient. We don't know how to do it for everybody yet, but I can tell you, this is the beginning of the end. This is how cancer is going to get licked. All right. In 25 years or so, we're going to figure a lot of stuff out that we haven't yet been able to figure out. But anybody who has cancer today or knows somebody with cancer should be having a conversation about immune therapy that boosts the blood supply. And when you eat the right foods, you can make those treatments work even better. And that's linked to gut health, which is linked to behavior, which is linked to our lifestyle. And now we're back to where we started, which is what's new. We now know that our diet and lifestyle can make a huge difference in terms of this dreaded disease called cancer.
Wow. I mean, again, this word cancer, I think the stats are now about 44% of people, men and women, will get cancer in their lifetime. I mean, this is something that, like you said, affects so many people. But there's, these codes that we could start to tap into. And I think that flip of the question from why aren't actually more people getting it is a pretty fascinating way to look at the problem. And then you've been, through tracking through that, been brought to food, and food is medicine. And I'm curious, when you think about that idea of food as medicine, if there's an example from your research or work that jumps out to you that says like, whoa, like this is the power of what's possible here. Like, is there a story or an example that's kind of showcasing what's possible with food?
Many stories. Okay. I will tell you that let me give you a historical story of how I got into this. So I study angiogenesis. Angio means blood vessel, genesis, how they grow. So my field, my work, angiogenesis, is really just studying how the body grows and maintains our circulation, right? So our circulation is very important because most people don't know this, but we have 60,000 miles worth of blood vessels packed inside our bodies. These are the highways and byways that bring oxygen that we breathe and the nutrients that we eat to every single organ in our body. All right. If your blood vessels are healthy, you got the potential to be optimally healthy. And if your blood vessels are sick, no way, no how, no matter what you do, you're not going to be super healthy. So I was looking at blood vessels, angiogenesis as a like a fundamental route to health. Okay. Now, it turns out the body does a great job in growing blood vessels where they need to grow, kind of like if you got a beautiful lawn in a country club and you got a couple of areas that turn bald. So what do? The gardener, the landscape, the person maintenance guy will come out there and sprinkle some grass seed or just put a new piece of sod on there, and boom, you filled it up. And that's what our body knows how to do with blood vessels. If we have in the course of our life an area where we're not having enough circulation, boom, our body just throws some fertilizer on there and grows more lawn, meaning blood vessels, in the bald patch in order to be able to get to where it goes. Now, do you get too many blood vessels? Nope, because our body, just like the country club, knows how to bust out the tractor and mow right over that area so you don't have overgrowth. All right. And that's really how we maintain our circulation. Not too much, not too little, just the right amount at all times. And our body maintains that like a gardener. Okay. So that's really how we behave. But you take one of these microscopic cancers, and they are really sneaky because over time, they try to figure out how to hijack your circulation and grow more blood vessels to feed themselves. So this is where food comes into play. And one of the first discoveries that was ever made about the ability of the foods that we eat to starve cancer. So we eat the food winds up starving our cancer by cutting off the blood supply. Now think about that. That's feed yourself in order to starve your cancer. It's almost like a mind trick, right?
It's fascinating.
But it works. Okay. And this was discovered by researchers from Switzerland. In fact, it was a Greek researcher working in a lab in Switzerland. His name was Ted Fotsis, and he was studying tissue samples from people that were from Japan, from a village in Japan. Now, this village in Japan was from near Okinawa. So, that's one of the blue zones where people eat really healthy and they're very active and vibrant. And, like the other blue zones, people tend to live to like 100 years old, like centenarians. Gosh, what a great place that you aspire to be. And what they found is when this researcher was looking at the urine, pee in this cup, people from Japan, all right, from Okinawa, and was doing the research on it, he discovered that there was so you put the urine in a lab test, and you're looking on a screen for what's in the urine, and it's got a bunch of human stuff, whatever you expect. Boom, he saw a big spike. Whoa, what is that spike? That spike doesn't normally occur in humans. It comes from plants. And in fact, that spike was a substance called genistein that is found in soy. Now, these Japanese farmers are mostly vegetarian. They grow soy. They eat soy. All right. And I know there's a whole mythology, urban legend in this country in America about soy and breast cancer. But here's where I'm going to flip the script on this and show you why this is wrong. That whole script of soy and breast cancer is completely wrong. Like anybody who believes that has got it inside out. So this researcher took this spike, cut it out of the sample, and studied it. And guess what this spike, where it comes from? It comes from soybeans. Only could come from soybeans. And when he tested it in the lab against the blood vessels that a cancer would grow, it completely cut off the blood vessels.
Wow.
It was powerful. Wow. As a plant-based food that was found in the urine. You gobble up through the mouth, you pee out the stuff, and that means that you still have the stuff floating in your bloodstream, right? And when you test it in the lab, cut off the blood supply to cancer. Okay, now, fast forward, study after study after study after study by real researchers have found that genistein, this same spike, you hear about all these spikes all the time in your body. I'm talking about a good spike, all right? This spike from soybeans is anti-angiogenic. Remember I told you angiogenesis is blood vessels. Anti-angiogenesis is a way of actually cutting off, targeting the blood vessels feeding cancer. Bad blood vessels, beat them back. All right. Your body's trying to pull out that tractor to mow it back down like the country club. Can't do it well enough. That cancer's a little, cancer's like a groundhog or a beaver that's coming out and digging up more of the lawn. Well, you know what we need to do? We need a little extra help. And what soy does, this protein, phytoprotein in soy, cuts off the blood supply, will help our bodies tip the balance in favor of starving the cancer.
Wow.
All right. So you can starve cancer by eating foods, including soy, to lower the risk of cancer, to slow the growth of cancer. And this has been proven in the lab. All right. So, remember I told you we've actually conquered cancer in a lab all the time. I mean, many times, time and again. So the question you should be asking, Tyler, is all right, be the skeptic and say, you know what? Nice story, but tell me if it works in people, right? You want to know that.
Of course.
I will tell you that this has been shown to work in people because researchers have studied the effect of soy against breast cancer, not causing breast cancer, but fighting breast cancer for this very reason of cutting off the blood supply to the breast cancer cells. And they studied the impact of eating soybeans, soy milk, tofu in women who are at the highest risk for breast cancer. All right. And you know who those women are? They're women who already have breast cancer. They're the one that's highest risk. So you can imagine just how outside of the box this kind of research is. Hey, let's take women who already have breast cancer and let's see how much soy they're eating and let's see if they're actually doing better. So this was called the Shanghai Women's Breast Cancer Study. It involved 5,000 women who already had breast cancer and looked at how much soy they ate and looked at whether or not they did worse. Okay. Now, if you believe the urban legend that soy is dangerous for breast cancer, you would think this is going to be really bad. This experiment is not going to come out well for the women. All right. But the actual results showed that those women who already had breast cancer, who ate more soy, had a 30% drop in dying of their breast cancer.
Wow.
All right. Wow. And those women who already had breast cancer, who had surgery or chemo or radiation, who didn't have any evidence of breast cancer left after treatment, if they were eating the most soy, they had a 30% less chance of having the cancer come back.
Wow. I've heard that urban myth. I think that probably a lot of people who are listening to this have. And then to hear that it's not just not true, it's actually flipped is fascinating. So soy is one of the things that people can eat. What are the other foods that are standouts to you?
And I could tell a similar story with the research, but let's go ahead and just create a list. All right. And the list you can go to the grocery store to get. All right. Green tea, go to the middle aisle, get some whole leaf green tea. Berries. Now go to the produce section. Which berries? Choose your favorite. Blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, blackberries, lingonberries. Okay, if you like Swedish food, and you listen, all berries. All right. Go to walnuts. Go to the bulk section of the nuts section. Walnuts, tree nuts, walnuts, pecans, almonds, macadamia. All right. Don't get them pre-seasoned with that nuclear colored stuff, which has really makes it ultra processed foods, but get it yourself. Toast the tree nuts yourself on a stainless steel pan. I told you I like to kind of cook. So toast it in a stainless steel pan and then take your own spices, reach into your pantry and spice them up yourself. That's been shown to decrease the risk. I got to tell you this statistic because it's an amazing study. A study of 700 people with stage 3 colon cancer. That's pretty advanced. And the study was involving really big medical centers like MD Anderson Cancer Center, Memorial Sloan Kettering, Dana-Farber Cancer Institute at Harvard. Okay, these kinds of studies of centers, they showed that those people with colon cancer, stage 3, who are getting standard of care treatment. All right, so these are people who are just getting treatment like everyone does. If those people were eating 2 fistfuls of tree nuts, like I just described, trail mix, call it, okay, they had a 50% lower risk of dying of their colon cancer.
Wow.
Now, how does that happen? Why would that be? Well, it turns out that the dietary fiber in tree nuts feeds the gut microbiome. We all heard about gut health now. Let's break it down. What does gut health mean? Well, it means a lot of things, but when we're talking about cancer, we're talking about your healthy gut bacteria that live in the lower third of your gut in the colon. Okay. And these gut bacteria, by the way, you know how many bacteria live in our gut?
No idea.
39 trillion. Almost the same number of bacteria in our bodies as our cells. So, like, we're one-to-one, almost one-to-one match with our bacteria. In fact, we're not even fully human. We're partly bacteria. All right. There's a name for that. And I wrote about this in my book called Eat to Beat Disease. Humans are not pure humans. We are actually partly bacteria. And our bacteria help us fight cancer, combat autoimmune disease, lower inflammation, fight obesity, prevent metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. These are our friends. Okay, these are our friends that live inside us. And I can tell you, there's the term for an organism. That's you and me, dressed up, taking a walk on the street or getting in our car, driving around. In one organism that's composed of multiple organisms is called a holo, H-O-L-O biont, B-I-O-N-T. So the correct reference to us is not human beings. We're actually a holobiont, which is a constellation of different organisms all cobbled together. But on the outside, we look pretty human. Okay, now you feed tree nuts to that gut microbiome. The fiber makes the gut microbiome, this healthy bacteria, thrive. And the first thing they do is they boost our immune system. Remember the Mike Tyson against cancer, and they lower inflammation, all right, which actually fuels inflammation, is like the gasoline that drives, like sparks cancer to grow faster. So it tips everything in the right direction. And not surprisingly, when you add that dietary ingredient, you actually begin to turn the tide against cancer. This is not food versus medicine. This is food and medicine. So tree nuts, berries, green leafy vegetables, broccoli, bok choy, Swiss chard, turnips, radishes. They all actually have cancer-fighting properties as well.
I can see people just writing down their grocery list as you're going through this. I feel like
Let's keep going. Seafood. All right, this has been studied because, if you eat fish that has healthy oils, omega-3s in fish, don't get at the top of the food chain, the swordfish and the tuna. I mean, okay, look, they taste pretty good, but they can actually have heavy metals like mercury. So I tend to tell people that's a rare treat. You don't want to be building up those toxins in your body, but eat lower in the food chain. You got your mackerel, sardines, anchovies, but I wrote about this in my second book, Eat to Beat Your Diet. If you calculate the amount of healthy omega-3s you need to improve your metabolism and fight cancer, it's not only the oily fish. You might say anchovies are a little too fishy for me. I prefer them. Okay, what about haddock? What about hake? All right. And then what if you don't like fish, but you don't mind shellfish, shrimp, lobster, crab? Oh, I don't like that kind of food. All right. Well, what about clams, mussels, oysters, clams, razor clams, the big clams that you use for clam chowder? They all contain healthy biotics. Another food, olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil also has bioactives, natural chemicals found in the olive itself that is pressed out in extra virgin olive oil. That's what makes olive oil green. That's what makes olive oil spicy in the back of your throat when you have it, like really great olive oil. I'm not talking about the El Cheapo stuff, all right, that you get in like El Cheapo restaurants. I'm talking about take your time and go to an olive oil sampling table if they have them in a grocery store every now and then, or if you see one in your town, like try it out. You'll see the best olive oils have very different tastes, and it's the polyphenols in olive oils that are cancer starving, lower inflammation, tip the balance in your favor to be able to help your body's health defenses. Fight cancer by cutting off the blood supply, by lowering inflammation, and by boosting up your immune defenses to fight cancer. So that's a short, that's an ultra
Yeah,
short.
yeah. No, I mean, but you can just start to see the power of this compounding foods, and as you're describing the list, the grocery list, you can almost see the regions of food and maybe why they're blue zones. Now that's the positive side of food. There's also, quite a negative side to food right now. And, there's a growing population that suffer from gut issues, bloating, PCOS, acne. How does food tie to that? How does food heal those things?
Let's take a dive at those health conditions that are characterized by inflammation, PCOS, inflammatory bowel disease, irritable gut, all those kinds of things, autoimmune conditions. They actually are linked to us eating too much of foods that contain substances that provoke inflammation in our body. So if you think about it, look, this is now pretty much common sense. If you haven't heard it, I'll say it one more time, but you know what I'm talking about. Eating more fresh, whole, plant-based foods is just healthier for you. All right. Eating less ultra-processed foods, the stuff you and I, Tyler, I'm sure grew up with, advertised on television, in a box, in a bag, in a can, colorful, really tasty. You stick it in a microwave, you nuke it, have it for lunch, have it as a snack. Listen, that's ultra-processed foods. Those contain additives, ingredients, artificial chemicals, artificial coloring, flavoring, preservatives that actually hurt our gut bacteria. They compromise our body's health defenses, the immune defense, the anti-angiogenic defense. They weaken our shields. It's kind of like clipping the wire on your burglar alarm in your house. All right. Hey, you know what? Nobody might break in, but you just might have made it easier for a home invader to come into your house. And that's basically what happens when we eat a lot of ultra processed foods that, in societies like America, we've actually literally drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, of big food for, 50 plus years. And I think we're now at a point where society is beginning to have this conversation. Don't we know enough now as a society to make better decisions overall? Everything from individual empowerment. So anybody listening to this, hey, it's up to you. You can easily make a healthy choice. I just told you, you want some berries, you want some nuts, you want to, berries and nuts. How about some dried berries like dried cranberries and tree nuts? Go ahead and throw some dark chocolate in there, which is also cancer fighting. And now you got yourself a nice homemade trail mix. Okay. Or a breakfast bar if you want to actually add some oats and granola in there. So I'm just telling you, the conversation that's going on now that is, spreading throughout the country at every level of society is saying, hey, isn't it time for us to know this stuff better? And this podcast is an opportunity for me as one of the players, one of the researchers, to get the word out, to just make healthier choices. And they're not expensive and they're much cheaper than anything you would pay for through an insurance with a copay or not, in order to be able to actually get healthy again.
I'm pretty fascinated by the gut mind connection. So I want to go there in a moment, but you're touching on this kind of food industry stuff. And I know this is kind of outside potentially your realm of expertise, but I find this fascinating, that we're talking about food more and diet more than we probably ever have. Yet a lot of the challenges are going in the wrong direction. And I think that whenever we're in one of those situations, it's just a fascinating kind of problem. How is this happening?
I'm a real pragmatist, meaning I'm a super practical guy. I also try to, have the right perspective and not get too jacked up, and polarized and, take a side. I'm sort of not are you shirts or skin kind of guy. I'm more of a okay, based on what we know, what's today's perspective really like? And here's what here's what I'll tell you. After World War II, so we're talking the 1940s and the 50s, we had a revolution with making food widely available, less expensive than it used to be, and super tasty. Listen, and we've seen this in modern day. Anybody who's experienced, as I'm sure you and I both have, experienced the tech revolution, right? Like my dad was an electrical engineer. The first computer that he used to have at his work at a university filled an entire room. And who would have thought that we would get a handheld with 10 times, 100 times more computing power, and that my dad actually had cheaper, easier, more convenient, and got more gizmos and like more bells and whistles to it. And I think that in the 1950s, that was the food industry. Today, it's the tech industry. And in the food industry, like they really did. It was exciting. It was heady days for them to be able to invent all this stuff. And to some extent, it actually was its own revolution to be able to make inexpensive food widely available, shelf stable, taste really great. And, to start a conversation about food. But we didn't know at that time. They didn't know at that time what were some of the harms. Because, back then, you're talking 1950s, that's like almost a century ago in terms of our knowledge of health. We didn't even understand how cancer worked back then. And I just told you, we just had this conversation about like the modern version of understanding of cancer. And now we're beginning to have a modern version of overall health and the role of diet. And so I think that while we didn't know before, and that arguably was the reason why all this innovation occurred and people celebrated about it. Like, and like I said, I told you, I don't take out any hammers to try to break down people's companies. I don't badmouth people. Listen, they did a great job in their time. Now it's our time. And in our time, we now know stuff that you can't unlearn once we're beginning to have this conversation. And the modern conversation is, shouldn't we have fewer additives, safer foods? Shouldn't we be packaging them in ways that aren't shedding microplastics, aren't subjecting us to artificial substances that can hurt our gut? You hurt our gut, you hurt our brain, like all this other kind of stuff. And maybe there's, in addition to the quest to develop effective treatments for Alzheimer's disease and cancer and cardiovascular disease and diabetes, maybe we should actually put a little bit of elbow grease in doing something to make today the same way of making healthy food widely available, not so expensive. And when you grow, by the way, I just got back from an amazing tour of a farm that grows vegetables for all the top end chefs and restaurants around the country. Okay. And they explained to me, because they're not chefs, they explained to me that when they treat the soil properly with regenerative farming, the microbiome, the healthy bacteria in the soil, treats the plants better. And so the food that grows from the plant, whether you're talking about a cucumber to a tomato to a carrot, becomes a lot more healthy. That plant is healthier. And then when we eat the healthier plant, we become more healthy. And so again, this is newfound knowledge that's building up really quickly on kind of what we've known for a long time. So people who are listening and say, oh yeah, we knew about healthy food for decades. All right, yeah, but now we're beginning to know it at a really, really deep level where we can begin once again to innovate, to do the cool stuff. What's the iPhone of food? If you wanted to make it whole and wholesome and do better for people as well as the planet. I mean, I think this is where we're going. So it's exciting times for it. And I think that's the conversation we need to be having.
I mean, it is an exciting time. It is, this moment where I think that, hopefully the pendulum is swinging. And we think about that idea of, the average person in the 60s and now, the average male in the 60s and we're now, about 25 pounds heavier than we were back then. If you could have a message to the average person right now to help them see food as a powerful tool for their long-term well-being, what would you say in that message?
I would say that food is a easy fix, the so-called low-hanging fruit for you to take an action right away, right after you hear this, with your next decision that you make, with what you're going to put in your body, what you're going to eat, that can actually start making inroads to get you towards health. We can always up our game, like if you're 20 years old, and you feel like you're immortal, okay, hey, let's raise the bar so you get to the next level. Okay, so you can bench press a little bit more. Okay, you can actually get a little bit more out of your health. If you're 30, you can definitely do more. And the more you do in your 30s, you're actually going to be setting yourself up for later. Even more true in your 40s. And at 50, when you start slowing down, most people start slowing down a little bit, mostly because there's a lot going on in people's lives, and the accumulated burden of our decisions, the good ones and the bad ones, wind up actually stacking up on us, and we start feeling the effects of all that. Hey, it's never too late to use food to reverse whatever's been going on in your life back towards health. That's the key thing. Reversing illness, reversing that trajectory. Nobody wants to be heading to the brick wall of cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, okay, dementia. If I told you in a simple way that you can make food choices starting right away that can help to avert your trajectory, so you're not going to hit that brick wall. So all you need to do is ask the next question: what are the foods I should be eating? And that's the conversation we should all be having. That's a question that anybody who wants to use food as medicine should be having, is asking people who are trusted sources, hey, give me an example of a food that actually is beneficial, which is the question you asked.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And hopefully people are going back to their grocery list right now. I brought up this idea of the connection between our brains and our gut. And I find, in general, I find that really fascinating. What are we learning about that? And how does that connection impact our overall health?
Our brain is still largely a black box, but it's not as impossible to know as we once thought, because we're beginning to make connections on our brain health that we didn't have before. A lot of these connections are, again, linked to the food that we eat. Gut-brain connection, pretty powerful. I went to medical school. All right. I never even heard of gut-brain connection until recently. People started talking about it, and I got involved with it myself. And wow, what an amazing new frontier, undiscovered country between how our gut can affect our brain. Okay, those 39 trillion bacteria that live in our gut, we don't know every single bacteria that's in there, but we know that there are at least some that actually the bacteria communicate with our brain. So how do they do that? Think about text messaging, your buddy, okay, or your boss, all right, or might be your spouse or whatever, or your kids. That's what our bacteria are doing. They can text message our brain, send an SMS, and what they do is they actually, the instructions, the messages travel up nerves that connect the brain to the gut. A lot of people don't know this, but there's a gigantic nerve called the vagus nerve. In fact, it's called one of the cranial, meaning brain, head, cranial nerves. Okay, it pops out of the brain like a gigantic telephone cable going into the Atlantic, at the bottom of the Atlantic, to connect the continents for communications. That's what our vagus nerve is. It goes down. It helps our face, and then it goes down our neck, and then it splays out like a horse's tail, if you can imagine that. And that horse's tail, all those little fibers from that nerve go all the way down our gut and wrap around, and that is actually how those SMS from our gut bacteria, we think, get sent to our brain. Now, there's other ways as well, but that's one of the ways. And we also believe that some of the bacteria climb up, okay, like a monkey, on those wires and get right to the brain as well. In fact, within the last couple of years, we've even discovered our brain has its own microbiome. We have our own bacteria hives that grow in and around our brain to keep our brain healthy. So I just made sort of this concept of gut-brain axis connection a lot more complicated, but this is kind of where we're at. These are the exciting things to researchers like me to figure out, all right, so what are them? So I'll tell you one example of a bacteria. One bacteria is called Lactobacillus reuteri. So bacteria have a first name and a last name. All right, in biology, we call it genus and species. Lactobacillus is what you find in yogurt. In fact, Lactobacillus reuteri used to be found in breast milk and yogurt and all kinds of different foods, but it's also part of our own natural healthy bacteria. And after the advent of antibiotics in the mid 1940s or so, people started not having as much or even any Lactobacillus reuteri, and nobody even thought twice about it until we begin then discovering that this bacteria communicates to our brain. And one thing that Lactobacillus reuteri does is it text messages our brain, and it tells our brain to release social hormones. What's a social hormone? Well, it's a neurotransmitter. It's a substance, a natural brain chemical that our brains release to make us more social. It controls our mood, controls our affect. And so you've heard about some of them, I'm sure, serotonin and dopamine and reward hormones. But there's one that you may or may not have heard of. Do you know have you heard of oxytocin?
I have, but please explain it.
Okay. Oxytocin is the mother of all social hormones. Oxytocin is what our brains release when we go to the airport to pick up a friend or relatives we haven't seen for a long time, somebody we like, all right? And you go to them at the, in the arrivals section, and you see them and you run up to them and you give them a big hug. Hey man, or hey, so glad to see you, or you give them a kid, and like your brain feels good. You feel good, like, I'm so glad. Your whole body feels good. It's because your brain is releasing oxytocin. That is how oxytocin makes you feel. Oxytocin is also what your brain releases when you get a kiss. I'm not talking about grandma's peck on the cheek. I'm talking about a deep, sensual French kiss. Your brain is releasing oxytocin. All right. And that's why it's so, you're kind of sent into a different realm, like romantically in your head during that kind of passionate kiss. Oxytocin is also what your brain releases, like huge amounts for a few seconds when you actually have an orgasm. Boom. All right. Bam. You have like lots of oxytocin. This bacteria, this little bacteria, helps to control that huge important hormone in our brain, gut brain. All right. And so, where do you find Lactobacillus reuteri? Well, they're now developing probiotics for it. And I'll tell you, I actually take one of them. I don't make any money from anything I'm telling you, but I'll tell you, it's so amazing because as I'm doing the research, I'm reading about this stuff. I take that Lactobacillus reuteri as a chewable, like a children's chewable.
Yeah.
And I know my friends who know that go, I don't know why you do that. Why don't you just pop it down? And I chew it because there is human research to show that this bacteria, healthy gut bacteria, Lactobacillus reuteri, it kills the bacteria that causes cavities.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So I chew it up and I swallow it. And now it's good for the first part of my gut and the last part of my gut and my brain as well. So, but you can also find it in food.
Mm-hmm.
You can find Lactobacillus reuteri. Again, this is I'm not telling you to eat a lot of junky food, but you can find it in sourdough bread. This is the bacteria used by traditional bakers. There's a starter bacteria to make sourdough bread, give it its tang. Lactobacillus makes lactic acid, and the tang in sourdough bread, lactic acid. So you can actually get a little bit of the Lactobacillus reuteri just from eating sourdough bread. Don't eat too much because it's a big carb load. All right, but you can eat some of it. I'm just telling you, like things that people character assassinate. Oh, no more bread. You know what? A little sour. If you're going to have bread, try some sourdough. Just don't eat too much of it. Other food that has Lactobacillus reuteri, this always brings a smile to people's faces, is Parmesan cheese. Italian one. Parmigiano Reggiano, the big orange wheels that you actually see. Okay, that's the starter bacteria for Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. Okay, so I'm not telling you to eat a lot of cheese. It's very salty. It's got a lot of saturated fat. But again, listen, I think that food should be joyful. And if I'm telling you it's okay every now and then to have some, a little piece of sourdough bread or shave some Parmigiano Reggiano cheese, the real kind, on your pasta, hey, you know what? I've just given you permission to enjoy your food in a way that could also help to support brain health as well.
It's amazing. And again, it feels like there's this pull towards the stuff that's going to make us healthier with food. But there's also, it seems like there's science coming out around the tough side of it, which is hearing about a connection between, gut brain and autism and schizophrenia and Alzheimer's and anxiety and depression. What's happening on that side?
So that actually seems to be so we started talking about healthy gut bacteria and what we can do to fortify the healthy gut bacteria. The flip side of that is we're also beginning to make these important and sometimes surprising links that when our gut bacteria are unhealthy, so like I told you, 39 trillion bacteria in your gut, it's like an ecosystem. Think about the Great Barrier Reef. It's an amazing. Have you ever been to the Great Barrier Reef?
No,
Okay.
love to.
You got to do it. It is an amazing thing. You go out like 2 hours. You got to go pretty far out now to be able to see the still living reef because unfortunately a lot of it's been bleached. You go all the way out and into like the shelf, and you're still there. Okay, you get in the water. Okay, and it just looks like the ocean on the top, regular ocean, open ocean. You go down and you are in this rainbow of color and life, this thriving ecosystem. And that's basically what's happening in our gut. We got the Great Barrier Reef of bacteria, healthy bacteria inside our gut. They're all doing their thing, keeping the reef, our bodies, healthy. All right. Now, what we realize is that many of these diseases that were big mysteries and big problems, autism, schizophrenia, depression, even autoimmune conditions, we're beginning to realize that that these people that have these conditions, their gut ecosystem is out of whack. All right, it's like somebody went in there and poured some bleach into the onto the Great Barrier Reef, and you killed off the moray eel, and you killed off the clownfish, and no more blue lobsters. And now what happens, right? Now the whole system is struggling, and we're beginning to realize because the gut and the brain are so tightly connected in ways that we're just beginning to discover. This is really the big, like billion-dollar question. Could the secret to autism be fixing our gut? Could the secret to depression be fixing our gut? And so this is what medical researchers are really setting out to do. And if I were a young researcher just getting started now, and I mentor young doctors, medical students all the time. I've told them, I said, like they always say, Dr. Lee, you got involved in angiogenesis and it created this, big medical transformation. What should I do today? What would be your advice? I would say, without hesitating, study the gut microbiome. That is going to change everything that we know about health and disease and the solutions. And so this is an exciting area. I'm glad you're asking about it, Tyler. And I want to make it clear to anybody who's listening. All right. I'm just telling you where we are today. We are just at the tip of the iceberg. Whatever I've told you is just what we're beginning to discover. We don't have the final result yet for anything, but man, is it exciting and man, is it hopeful for those of us who are really trying to find ways to help people live better, longer lives.
I love that message of hope. And I mean, you're still doing work. You're still doing unbelievable research. What do you hope to accomplish in the next 5 to 10 years in your work?
Oh, man. I got so many projects going on right now. Let me kind of see if I can pick out an overarching theme of something I'm trying to do. Well, I'm very passionate about food as medicine. How can you use food to actually prevent diseases so we can dodge cancer and dodge heart disease and dodge diabetes and obesity and dementia. And by the way, the food that we eat that feeds our gut might actually be that connector. So I'm super excited by that. Food as medicine. But at my organization, the Angiogenesis Foundation, which is a nonprofit, it's our 30th year. We've been, breaking one glass ceiling after the other for 30 years. There's like 47 FDA-approved new treatments that we've been involved with. The next glass ceiling that we really, really hope to break open is how do you use foods and medicines together? So how some people are basically just waving the kale leaf and said, throw away your doctor. You don't need them. You can actually eat one of these and you'll be fine. That's not us. What I really believe is that use food for prevent disease, but when you're sick, because we're all going to get sick from something, all right, and your please, you should go to the best doctor you can find, and hopefully your doctor's a really good doctor to treat you with the best of what we know, all right, and I'm involved with that side of the equation too, but what I am really keen to find out to help people is for somebody who's sick, like a cancer patient, who wants to know, hey, doc, after you ask the question, what do I got? How long do I have to live? What are the treatments? Okay. The next question that gets asked is, hey, what should I eat to help myself? And I really, really want over the next 5 years to be able to help people understand more, whether it's cancer, autoimmune disease, diabetes, or dementia. What can I eat along with all the other things my doctor's giving me? Because I'm a doctor, I appreciate that. But the missing tool in the toolbox, the missing answer, missing piece in a puzzle is what should we be telling people and what should people be telling themselves to eat in order to make their medicines work even better? That's something I think we can expect in the future ahead.
When you think about your legacy of work, what's the lesson that took you the longest to learn? Not necessarily medical, but personally.
You know, and I think you're going to see this is something that many people who have done remarkable things all say. I've heard this before myself. Is persistence and perseverance. You have got to have the grit to be able to actually come up with ideas, see things that other people might not be seeing, dive at figuring those things out. And even if you get sneered at, laughed at, kicked at every now and then, have some dirt kicked in your face, if you believe enough that this is something that's worth pursuing, you've got to have the grit to drive your personal commitment through to figure this out. And you know what? That's how breakthroughs are made. If otherwise everybody would be making these breakthroughs, it wouldn't be a breakthrough, right? So I've learned time and time and again, and I was very fortunate to be mentored by this amazing doctor, kind of visionary named Judah Folkman when I was in my late 20s, early 30s. He took me under his wing, and it was like learning from, how to paint the Sistine Chapel, from Michelangelo. Like, how do you actually do that? One thing I learned from him, and I've learned myself since then, you've got to have persistence. You've got to just keep at it, perseverance, keep going at it, and don't let other people sway you too much. You got to go for it yourself.
What's the legacy you hope to leave behind?
Well, I'm still so active doing things. I don't think about legacy, to be honest with you. I've already left a legacy of helping, 47 treatments come out for cancer and vision loss and treat blindness and healing wounds and diabetes and other diseases. So, there's the tail is getting pretty long right now. But I will tell you, honestly, I hope one of the things I leave is a little bit of my secret sauce for the next generation of go-getters and paradigm shifters and change makers to tear a page from my playbook. If I could do that and just keep tearing pages and handing them out to promising people, I would love to do that. Like, that would be something I believe in really strongly, is that, do the best work you can when you can, but teach somebody else how to actually do what you've done really well, and then let them fly.
Wow. And all of this work, best-selling books, this long tail that's kind of formed behind you now of impact that you've had. It's almost hard to ask this next question, but given all of that, what do you see as being next for you?
Oh, I'll tell you, because I'm working on it. So that's an easy one. I am actually working on longevity, but I'm not working on it in the same way that you hear about on social media or, on television or, at these big conferences. I'm not trying to conquer death. I'm not trying to, there's no number, triple digit I'm trying to aim at to, get people to 150 or 300 or whatever. Like, listen, you know what? Good luck to those people. I champion that enterprise. Like, that's innovation. Go for it. See what you can come up with. My focus is really on how do we actually thrive as we age for as many years as you can squeeze out of life. How do we make them as fulfilling and rich and thrilling as possible? And so that's what I'm working on now. The science behind that, connecting it with food, with diet and lifestyle. And that's what I'm working on.
Dr. Lee, where can people find your work?
I'm really passionate about getting out to people who want to know more information that I'm actually seeing, that I'm doing research on. So if you want to find out more from me, check out my YouTube channel. which is Dr. Dr. William Lee, Li. I literally take questions in from people that are asking it. I study them. I try to figure out like, what can I actually put out on my YouTube channel that people are interested in hearing about, and get it out there. And I do that 3 times a week, 3 or more. So that's a great channel to learn more. Sign up for my newsletter. Come to my website, Dr. Dr. William Lee, Li. And then I'm on the usual, social media channels, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. My handle is at Dr. Dr. William Lee, Li. And I hope to see you there.
Dr. William Lee, this has been an absolute pleasure. I've learned a ton today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Been a real pleasure.